he was called by a big television channel, TV Globo, to do an episode for a series. And Fernando
Mm.
said, "No, sorry, I'm very busy preparing my feature film here, so I won't be able." So they insisted so much, and they said, "Well, do something related to your film if you want." And Fernando said, "Ah, okay." So he got a chapter of the film of the book City of God, adapted it, and did a short feature, and we shot this short episode for a Brazilian series in the style of City of God 6 months prior to that. And that
Mm.
was the best thing that happened because we were able to rehearse, prepare.
Looking forward to chatting with you about Constant Gardener and City of God. Let's start with the City of God first.
Yes,
Um, I think that was before Constant Gardener, right?
yes,
2002.
yes.
Yeah.
City of God was the film that kind of because we were filmmakers working in Brazil, in South America, and nobody knew about us. But City of God had such a good
Yeah.
luck and such a good projection that we ended up being known. And then we got the invitation to do Constant Gardener and all the other films that came after that. So City of God was the
Yeah, no, that's great. And go ahead, please.
no, that City of God was the film that made it all because as I said, we were living in Brazil, working for the Brazilian film industry, and didn't have any idea that we could, go international. And because of, well, what happened actually, what I say is there was like a tendency to look at South American films because the world had gone kind of tired of um, all because before that it was the Iranian films, you know.
Mm.
There was this tendency, this interest for the Iranian cinema. So I mean, I think that cycle had kind of ended. The world was a little bit, you know, looking for something different, and then South American films appeared, and the first one that appeared was Central Station, Walter Salles Central Station. Then González Iñárritu Amores Perros,
Hmm.
and that made the international film critics and world look at South America, and then after that came City of God, and as I always joke, I say Central Station knocked at the door, Amores Perros opened a little gap, and City of God just pushed the door open and went in. That's kind of what happened in a way. And yes, we got a lot of attention because of City of God. And another thing that happened that was very funny and very lucky was that um, um, Miramax had City of God, and it had also the the Brooklyn gang, the gangster, that film of gangsters of
Uh,
of uh, of
New York,
Brooklyn. Yeah,
Gangs of New York by
the
Martin
Gang of New
Scorsese.
York. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So it was in a similar subject. So because Miramax had invested so much in Gangs of New York, they kind of boycotted City of God because they had it also, in order to, not have two films in the same line.
Right.
So what happened was the film people discovered City of God and started demanding the Miramax people, Weinstein and them, why don't you show this film? And so and so. So what happened was, after the year of Gangs of New York, and City of God kept hidden, he decided to relaunch City of God the next year, and that was with the support of lots of film people that had discovered. And it's typical in cinema that what when you find something strange coming from a strange place, like in Brazil or something like that, you feel that you have a gem or something. So that's what happened. We were kind of protected by lots of film people that thought that you know City of God had to be seen. So we got pushed up, and I remember being called. I was filming in Brazil, being called by Tony Scott, that
Mhm.
wanted to do Man on Fire, and he had seen City of God, and he wanted Man on Fire to be as close as possible. Hold on. As close as possible to City of God. So people tell me that they would walk into his company, and he would be walking around the company with a tape of City of God under his arm, and he would say, "Come in, let me show you something." And he was, and when he did Man on Fire, he wanted to call the editor, the actors, me, he wanted as much of the crew of City of God working with him in that film. So yeah, City of God was a very favorable accident that projected us, and because of that, afterwards came Constant Garner and other films.
Yeah, so City of God, I remember I saw Constant Gardener before I saw City of God. I
Oh,
remember in those years, I remember seeing the poster. I never saw the film until 2019. I saw the film. That was, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier when I was making one of my films. Somebody had suggested to me watch the opening sequence of City of God just to get some, inspiration to find a hook to your story. And I started watching that, and that the opening sequence itself is enough. I think the first 10 seconds are enough to pull you in and not let you go. That's what's so incredible about it. Um, from the standpoint of being in people's spaces, in the actor spaces, in the character spaces, then the editing, direction, everything was just so fresh. Like you said, like, the gem. And that's what Hollywood does. Like right now, nowadays, South Korean films are pretty big, right? Like that's the
yes,
new trend now.
yeah,
But City of God, when I was watching it, the first thing it reminded me of completely different films, but in terms of the way they were shot and the way they were edited, but similar, um, not similar, but themes were similar. Have you read the book or seen the film Outsiders?
no,
So The Outsiders is a story of two gangs. It's written by S.E. Hinton and it was directed by Francis Ford Coppola right
ah,
after Apocalypse Now. Tom
ah,
Cruise, Tom Cruise's first film with like a supporting role, like 3 minute role is in there. Matt Dillon, Patrick Swayze, great movie. So that and it, but the
outsiders,
completely different worlds,
outsiders.
right?
I'll check it up. Outside of Coppola.
Yeah,
Is
The
that
Outsiders. It's based on a book by S.E. Hinton. It's a great movie. Um, but that's what it first reminded me of. But at the same time, the authenticity in this film is so good, and that comes in my view, which is why I wanted to talk to you, uh, from cinematography, right? Obviously, there's great direction, great editing, everything, performances, but there's a sequence. I'm really terrible with character names, so please forgive me. There's a sequence when these young kids are in the corner of a fence, and they're trying to they're talking about how they want to be part of gangs, and the real guys come in, and there's a sequence where two boys are being picked to, to be shot at by one of the younger boys. I mean, that's such an amazing sequence, and it was completely unpredictable the way it unfolded. Tell me about that. What was the, I mean, what was the whole process with that? Was there any storyboards, or was it just complete doc style, go along with it as it's happening?
Because the kids were non-actors and were so young from the very beginning. What happened was we were very lucky on this film that um, Fernando Meirelles was very committed to preparing. He had moved from Sao Paulo to Rio de Janeiro. That's a big move because it's 400 kilometers to different cities. He had settled down in Rio de Janeiro, living there to prepare the film. And he was called by a big television channel, TV Globo, Brazilian big TV, to do an episode for a series. And Fernando
Mm,
said, "No, sorry, I'm very busy preparing my feature film here, so I won't be able." So they insisted so much, and they said, "Well, do something related to your film if you want." And Fernando said, "Ah, okay." So he got a chapter of the film of the book City of God, adapted it, and did a short feature, and we shot this short episode for a Brazilian series in the style of City of God 6 months prior to that. And that was the
mm,
best thing that happened because we were able to rehearse, prepare. Like, for example, I was investigating into a new technology that was at the moment because uh, it was the first film that was shot uh, on film, edited and post-produced digitally, and then taken back to film to be projected as film. That was and that was very, very important to me because I was doing that in commercials, and I found the power of color correcting digitally, and it was so important to me that I couldn't see myself doing a film without using that. So I investigated a lot and I got an engineer that helped me a lot, and we finally managed to do this. And City of God was probably the first film that did that. Film, digital film. So, this short feature that we did for TV Globo was so important that we were able to rehearse a lot. And one of the things that we rehearsed was working with these kids. And by working with them, we realized that it was going to be impossible to make the kids behave as actors and follow marks and follow. So I told Fernando, we have to shoot the film as a documentary. Just let them go, let them do their stuff.
mm,
I'll hide as much as I can with the camera, and we'll just grab. And all the thing was prepared in that direction. Like, for example, I always repeat this, that when I engaged in the film, the first thing that I did was ask the producer, said, I need an assistant cameraman that is very prepared for documentaries because I won't let him use the tape to measure at what distance the actors are. He'll have to improvise
mhm.
following focus because I'll be, following the actors like that. And that is something that we learned doing this short film that we did 6 months prior to filming. That and this short film was released. It's called Golden Gate. I can send you a copy of it afterwards, and you'll see
Absolutely.
and you'll see that in this film it's got all the styles possible of film because I was rehearsing, filming with different cameras. I used like 10 types of different negatives, three types of camera. It's got no coherence because it's every shot is different from the other because I'm using it to rehearse, to prepare, to test. So that was very lucky. And because of that, and because we were able to take this short feature all the way until the final print. And I remember always with great pleasure a Saturday morning that production um, had reserved a screening room. I took Fernando and screened the test of this short feature Golden Gate to Fernando. And at the end, Fernando turns around and says, "Let's go," because there was a big, like, there was one of the producers that had told Fernando not to listen to me because I was crazy. And what I was proposing was suicide, to mix 16 millimeters with 35. That is, that wouldn't work, and so and so. So, I was very insecure, and I was making Fernando be very insecure by this crazy idea. But finally, we managed, to see the short feature and see that it worked, and see it in a huge screen, and it works. Okay, that's how we're going. So then we shot City of God this way, mixing 16 and 35 different, and documentary. And that scene that you refer is exactly that. The kids came, and this is something that I always like to mention is, in Bicycle Thieves of Antonioni or Visconti. I don't Visconti, I think it is. Sorry. It's one of
That's okay.
both. Big mistake. In that film, there is a very famous scene where the old guy is sitting in the road by the kid, and the kid is crying because the guy said, "You stole the bike." And the crying of the kid is so real, because, and that is something that I learned and realized in this scene of City of God, is kids, before they're 7 years old, before they enter the rational, they mix reality with fantasy, and they can be training as actors for months, but once they go into the character, they forget about reality. And that's what happened to that kid in Bicycle Thieves and that kid in City of God. It happened that exactly. He had been training that scene with Fatima Toledo for months, 6 months. But when he came into set and everything was prepared, he was and he suffered really. And we were very sad because that suffering is real. And he, and the scene finished and everybody hugged him. And he realized that, it was fantasy, but he had suffered so what we did that was just register, you know, as a documentary. I was there, and I always tried to find a way of, for example, in a scene like that, I would sit in the middle and turn around to whoever, wherever the action interesting was. So yes, in that case, I was with one of the cameras. We had two cameras. With one of the cameras, I was in the middle, as discreet as I could be. The cameras were small, and I would, just follow, and that's what gave that sensation of reality to it, because we were hidden. Like
Right.
today, like what's happening today with all this social media, that people with their cell phones just capture incredible things, of car accidents or whatever, because the, documentary styles are there. That's what was happening.
Yeah. No, and it shows in that, right? And it's like it's one of those rare films where the marriage of direction, performances, cinematography, and editing, and everything else just sinks in perfectly. Like you're so involved in the characters and in the film, and cinema, film having cinematic shots is amazing. Like, you need those kind of things. But in this case, if this film was shot cinematically, like, like Godfather or Apocalypse Now, it wouldn't have worked because the environment and the world is so different and the kids are
Yeah,
always on the run, right? Like that's just the way the kid's nature is. You're always on the run. And it just
exactly.
captures it beautifully. And the color tone and the lenses, one scene that stands out the most to me was in the beginning Um, when when the cops come, um, when they rob the milkman, I think it was the milkman they robbed, right? The bunch of kids, and then the kids run and they're running in between the homes, and the use of the lenses that you use. I mean, I'm assuming you use a lot of long lenses in some of the scenes, and just to give that like a, wide focal length was beautiful. And what lenses did you use? I mean, I'm just curious.
Um,
Overall.
Fernando was very concerned that uh, the audience would follow the three different periods. So that first period that
Hmm.
you refer to uh, was the light, the ingenuous, the
Hmm.
naive part. Fernando wanted it to look like spaghetti western, very
Hmm.
naive, very. So we had that sequence of them running that was like a cart being followed by cowboys and stuff like that. So and we separated in color, that sepia brownish color, because we wanted to
Right.
separate the different periods.
Time
So
times.
for that, so for that part, we thought of using very wide lenses to show the landscape of the cowboys and stuff like that. Very much like, the those spaghetti westerns. So yes, we used wide, very wide shots for the beginning, some tight shots, but we got much tighter later, when we go into the characters, when we go into the 80s, because that was the 60s that was very, naive.
Right. Right. How big was the crew for the film?
Was a regular film crew,
Okay.
two two people helping me with the camera, first assistant, second assistant, that was loader. Um, then a key grip and like two grips, um, a key gaffer and two or three gaffers. Sometimes because we
Okay.
had more complicated lighting, we would, hire some more for those days. But basically, it was the typical South American crew.
Right. And what was the most challenging scene to work on from a logistics standpoint, or even, yeah, from a logistics standpoint? I know it's been a while, so if it's
Yeah.
something you're not remembering, don't worry about it. Or let me rephrase it. What was the most fun scene to film? I mean, the whole film is, I would imagine you guys had a great time filming, shooting, but
Mhm.
just personally for you, or something that made you emotional, something that made you laugh the most, or just any kind of emotion.
You know what? I always have trouble with this question when they do me this question. I always have trouble because to me it's just one film, one block,
Mm,
and I
good.
I'm I have trouble separating one scene that to me it's like the whole thing. That scene that we were talking about was great to do, but other was following the chicken was a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
following the kids was a lot of fun, and
Gotcha.
yeah,
No, it makes sense. I get it. Don't worry about it. So let me ask you this. Do you remember the time when you guys realized that the film has been, is becoming this worldwide phenomenon leading up to the Oscars? Like, what was that process like? I mean, like you said in the beginning, like you guys had never imagined for that to happen. It launched your careers. Do you recall those moments of leading up to all that, success
yeah,
and
yeah. It
fame,
it
if you
it,
want to call it?
it, it it's a day-to-day thing that the film goes to one festival, and then you hear and you read that it was so well received. The next thing is another festival, and then a critic, and it starts building up. So you get there isn't a one moment. It's like a gradual thing that happens and happens and happens. I remember, for example, I was in holidays with my family in a hotel in south of Brazil. My family is all spread through South America, so we try to gather. So I had my sisters coming from Chile, my mother and my brother coming from Uruguay, me from São Paulo. So we had gathered in this beautiful beach in the south of Brazil, Santa Catarina, Florianopolis.
Mhm.
And I received the news that the film had been selected, that we had four nominations to the Oscar. So it was a great fun, all the family just jumping into the swimming pool and hurrah, hurrah, and and my brother recording that scene. Oh, so it's things that grow up and you start, finding out and receiving and enjoying.
Right. So it was nominated for four Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Editing, and uh,
It was best script writing, best
right,
best
scriptwriter.
best directing, best editing, and best cinematography. We didn't make it to the
Right.
best film.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I may have misread. So that's great. I'm glad that you got nominated because when I read that somewhere, I was like, okay, how can this film not be nominated for, best cinematography? Because it was really, really well done. So I'm glad to hear that. That's amazing. It's an amazing film. And I highly recommend everybody watching it because not just because, it's technically amazing, it's just the story and the characters are very,
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah. No.
attachable. Like you can relate to them. I mean, not everybody is a gang member in the world, but you can just relate to their stories, their individual stories, right? It's a
Mhm.
beautiful film. Thank you so much for that. I
No,
really,
thank
really
you. Thank you.
enjoyed it. And but the contrast to that is Constant Gardener. Right. To me, Constant Gardener, even though that was like a very docu style as well, not as much as City of God. One scene that I absolutely loved the way it was shot and lit. When the characters, when what's her name? Rachel Wise, yeah. She
Yeah.
questions Ray Fiennes when he's speaking, and they're in this room where there's a lot of windows and you can see outside. Normally you have a scene like that, you would have the windows outside the windows. It would be a little bit overblown, but it was the balance between indoors and outdoors was so spot on that I felt that they were part of the outside world. I mean, I just wanted to make that comment. It was just so beautifully lit and beautifully done and beautifully shot with your longer, lenses. And that whole scene where they first meet, it just it just stands out really, really amazingly.
Oh, thank you. I worked hard on that scene, testing and preparing and lighting. It's good that it, you saw it because it's one of the scenes that was difficult because I had all those, and the normal thing would be just let it blow out. But
Yeah.
I didn't imagine, being in London and, to contextualize and put the characters in their place where they are. It's important. So yeah, it was a we
Right.
had a little bit of work to balance that and to get it.
For sure. What was it's Constant Gardener is I think it's a very relevant film even in today's time, and it probably will for a while, because of its subject matter and whatnot. How much were you aware of stories like these? This is like 22 years ago, or no, almost 20 years ago. Um, what did you learn out of it from working on a film like this and going to,
Yeah.
Africa and then kind of going back and forth?
No, I learned a lot. I didn't have the slight. I mean, you suspect that the pharma companies do this type of stuff, but you don't realize so much until somebody like John Le Carre researches and puts it in a book, and from there becomes a script. Um, I didn't I wasn't conscious, and it was great that doing the film and finding out and learning about this was very important. and making other people. I always joke that this film gave me one of the um, most uh, the nicest prizes awards that I've received, and this award was a friend of mine went to a screening. You know those screenings that they do before launching the film that they do to influencers,
Right,
and
right, right.
when the film finishes, they're walking, and everybody gathers together, and you can listen comments. And in this screening, Hillary Clinton was invited, and she was candidate to the to be president of the United States in that
Mhm.
at that moment. And my friend tells me that he listened, that she says to one of the guys that is walking with her, probably somebody that was working with her in a campaign. He says, "Huh, this thing about the pharma companies, we have to research into that and put it into the campaign." So, that that is pleasing in the sense that, okay, the film was useful. We made somebody aware of that, somebody powerful aware of that, and go into and research about how serious those things are. And, you know, that's a good
Right.
reason for making a film like that. That's why I
That's
consider
amazing.
it, that's why I consider it an award.
No, that's amazing. And one of the things that, the way cinema changes the world, right? And after the Vietnam War, a lot of films came out about, the aftermath of the veterans, like Oliver Stone made several films on that. Then after the 9/11 and attacks and the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, a lot of films came out on that subject. And I think around that year when Constant Gardener came out and a bunch of there's a lot of politically driven stories of films that were being made. But Constant Gardener was something on its own because it wasn't really dealing with the Iraq War or the aftermath and all that. One of the things that I really normally you watch a film. So if you watch a film that's shot in two different worlds, like, like in this case, like UK, which is everything is like, prestige and clean and civilized, for the lack of a better word. And then you go to these, remote parts of these villages in Africa, and they're completely different worlds. But the way you guys um, merge them both together, I couldn't differentiate between them. And I think part of that, for me at least, was that you have this beautiful looking world that is all fake and corrupted. And then you have this really, really devastating looking world that is just genuine and honest. And the striking contrast was there, but it wasn't there. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I
Hmm.
thought that was really well done.
Well, I hadn't thought of that. Interesting.
Just a observation. I mean, everybody has their own interpretations, right? Doesn't
Yeah,
make it
yeah.
right. But what was well? I mean, you had shot City of God in a completely you know in a world which was not something that the West is used to seeing on cinema, and even being filming in there can be challenging. And a similar thing with with Constant Gardener. Was there any logistic challenge from the authorities or from logistic standpoints, whether it was the weather or anything like that, that you guys had to deal with?
No, we had an excellent British English film company that had very good relationship with companies in Africa.
Mm,
Basically, what happened was we scouted the film uh, first, supported by a South African film company, and the South African film company um, took us to visit locations in South Africa because for them it was much more secure to film in South Africa where they had the structure. And they imagined that we would come with a big structure, and but Fernando and me in this pre-scout, we wanted to see the book what John le Carré had written, and that happened in Kenya. So we asked the production to take us to Kenya,
Mm.
and we said we can film here. I know, but there's no film structure. Well, we bring it in. It's small cameras and stuff. So the film company was very, very nice, very sweet, blue skies, and they adapted and they made it possible that we filmed in Kenya. And it's very nice that now after 20 so years I went back and I filmed again in Kenya with the same company, and here I am very happy to, my next film is a sequel of The Constant Gardener.
Really?
No, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's a film, a beautiful film I did with Kanan Warsame, the composer, singer, musician, and
Hmm.
he is Somali, so he wrote a story that happens in Somalia, and in this case, because it was so complicated to film in Somalia, we filmed mostly in Kenya, and then I filmed with the same film company, and it was beautiful to film, with the same people which I had done The Constant Gardener 20 years after.
Right. So the Constant Gardener has a star cast, right? Ray Fiennes and Rachel Weisz, like even at that time, were pretty big stars. City of God, completely different. Maybe in the Brazilian world, yes, but not to the Western
Oh, no,
world,
no, no.
right? So what did you see in Fernando? Because sometimes you can get, going from that world of nobodies to somebody, it can get intimidating sometimes, depending on who
Yes.
you're working with. How did you guys transition yourself as well as what you saw Fernando working with people like Ray Fiennes and Rachel Weisz?
Mm.
Was there any difference? Was it a piece of cake? Was it just, did it
No,
make you guys
no.
feel comfortable?
Fernando was it was more strange for Fernando and me to go to the favelas and film City of God than to film Ray Fiennes and Rachel Weisz, because we were more accustomed to, the normal Brazilian
Actors.
actors or South American actors. So yes, Ray Fiennes and Rachel Weisz were couple of steps higher, but it was actors that, Fernando is married to an actress dancing. She dances an actress. So
Mm.
we are in this world. So no, to us it was normal. It was more rare to film in the favelas than to film in in Africa with Rafe and Rachel.
In terms of um, cinematography, I love the contrast in Constant Gardener. Like the color correction is really, really well done. It has a natural look, of course, but at the same time, there's a subtle contrast that pops out, and it just really draws you in. Um, what was, I mean, like you said, there was, different time periods in City of God, kind of a little bit, but not too much in Constant Gardener, not as much as difference as it was in City of God. What was the discussion that you had with Fernando in terms of the look of the film before the production began, and even during scouting and all that?
Mm. Yeah, let me tell you a kind of funny thing that when we were hired to do The Constant Gardener, well, Fernando starts first and then he tells, and the producer, a British producer, Tracy Seward, she sends me, I'm in Brazil, and she sends me a lot of curriculum, CVs of assistant cameraman and gaffers for me to start choosing the crew. And I tell her, no, 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 hold on just a second. The first guy that I choose into my crew is the color corrector, the colorist. because it's with
Mm,
him that I'm going to establish the look, and with him that I'm going to start thinking of what type of crew, what type of equipment, and so and so. And that's exactly what happened. She understood that and she sent me, and I made contact with Asa Soul, a colorist from London. I don't know what lab he's on now, but very good, very great colorist. And with him, I chose what type of negative I would use, how I would expose a negative, because I would do tests and I would go to the color suite with him and start playing. And oh, I like this, like that. And we would find the look and establish how I would expose according to, because it's very important that what you film interacts with the color correction. So it's good
mm-hmm.
that you mentioned, because color correcting was very important in this film. And what I normally do is, when I'm scouting, I start taking pictures. Now I film, but at that period, I would take pictures with my camera and a negative similar to the negative that I would using. And I go to the color correction, I correct them, and I share them with Fernando and say, oh, for this sequence, I'm thinking of going more or less in this direction. What do you think? Oh, I think it's great. Or oh, I think it's a little bit too much. Or I start uh, making the decisions of the color grading with Fernando. Normally, Fernando is very generous and he accepts most of what I propose, because we have talked about it. And I wanted the
Right.
African, I wanted the African color to pop out and to be something very contrasty with this very boring, constant gardener's world of green and plants. I wanted the
Mm.
Africa to be exploding color. So that was my proposal, and Fernando liked it, and we worked out. But that was something that I worked together with Asa in the post production and all the time doing those uh, approaches.
Right. Would you have, this is going back to City of God. And we talked about this when we talked about sugar, that you had some of, you got iPhones from Apple because an Apple series to, you put them in the car where Colin Farrell was. If you had iPhones available back then, just would you have done certain sequences on the iPhone with Filmic Pro app?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, the the iPhone opened up such a possibility, of doing things. It's amazing. So yes, well, the fact that I was filming at that time with 35 and 16 millimeter, that already, because the 16 millimeter cameras were so light that I could go, you know,
Mm,
in the car handheld with Ray Fiennes driving, and that was a very nice. The last sequence that we did in that film is a driving scene of Ray Fiennes driving, and it was Fernando in the back with a tape recorder, me in the front seat by Ray Fiennes with a 16, and we just drove around, and you know just that small filming crew. When we finished, Ray Fiennes says, "Gentlemen, this was one of the most nicest moments I've had. Very, 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 very grateful, very nice experience." And yes, because if that was instead of 16 an iPhone, I would have done it. Yes.
it's
Yeah, I
interesting
think
you mentioned
I
that.
think we have to be open and uh, yeah, and open to all these new things that technology is giving us, and incorporate them and use them, because they're here to be used. If they help the
Right.
story, if they help telling the story, why not?
100%. And I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about Ray Fiennes thanking you and Fernando that, it was one of the most amazing experiences as opposed to like, big crew, big set, which is necessary when it's needed. But I also do know from
Yes.
my own experience, you know, and you've done documentaries too. Um, when you have a small crew, it makes the subject or the person that you're interviewing or following less intimidating to you. They just feel more comfortable, and that's what it's all about. The filmmaking is all about making each other feel comfortable. And actors can pull off big sets because they're used to it, right? But even sometimes they have their days. And it is
Absolutely.
something
You
that's
know, and
really,
people
really
are so
underrated,
accustomed,
I find that,
people are so accustomed to
yeah,
this, you know. People,
yeah,
if I was like this here, you would be talking to me the same comfortably, instead of if I was with a huge camera and a boom, you know, you would be intimidated. But this today doesn't intimidate. So yeah, 100%.
yeah, 100%. You remember when the 5D revolution happened, in 2009, 2010? Like, I used to, at the time, for about 6 years, I did a lot of South Asian weddings all over the world. And so that taught me a lot about, like, run and go and capturing moments as they're happening. So there's no time to reshoot. You just have to go.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the reasons, and at that time I didn't realize this. I realized this 5 years ago when I started working on my last film that I did, was people. If I had not used 5Ds for those weddings, which was at the time not many people were doing it. They were just kind of kicking in. I wouldn't have been able to capture the moments that I did had it been like, with a gigantic camera, because it made like really, really different. People just feel relaxed and they feel comfortable.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the exactly the same, the sequence of City of God at the beginning that you like so much, that is because I was able to shoot it with 16 millimeter cameras that I would put at the end of a pole and run with them in on the floor. If I had to do that with a 35, or would have to have built a very, and this was just me with goggles, seeing the image coming into those goggles and following a chicken, and with the camera just attached to a pole that was at the height of the floor.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there a lot any behind the scene footage of all that?
Oh, yes, there is. Yeah.
There is. Okay, awesome. I'd love to check that out. Maybe it's on the
I'll
DVD. I'd love
send
to
them to
check
you.
that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. No, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for making City of
It's,
God and Constant Gardener. I will say one thing about Constant Gardener. I feel, and I could be dead wrong about this, but when I think about that year when Constant Gardener came out, and when I saw it in theaters, it probably turned me into a filmmaker that I never thought I would be, where you deal with social and political and human rights subjects. So it had a big influence on me, not knowingly. Because if there's
oh,
one film that I can think about back then that was political, social, and everything, I don't remember any one of them except Constant Gardener. So thank you for that.
oh,
It was a
oh,
very, very, very.
that is very nice to listen. It helps me a lot. Thank you very much.
No, please, thank you, and thank Fernando for me too, who I would love to talk to one day as well. I mean, he's just an incredible filmmaker. But thank you so much. This has
Uh,
been amazing.
I'll send you his contact. He's very nice. Yeah, I'll send you his contact. Just write to him. I'll tell him that yeah,
Great, that'd be awesome.
he'll enjoy it.
That'd be awesome. I would love talking to you more in the near future, about your upcoming project whenever you're ready. Maybe something in the past, whenever you have time in the next few months, we'll talk again. I always love talking to you. It's a pleasure.
Me too. Me too. It's a pleasure also.